TSA wants to remind you to be Real ID ready. The requirements to have a Real ID go into effect tomorrow. News 4 Tucson's Megan Spector is live right now at the Tucson International Airport. Megan, what do travelers need to know?
Yeah, well, Robbie, we've been talking about these requirements for years now, right? But starting tomorrow, that enforcement begins. If you're traveling through, needing to go through TSA to catch your flight, you will need to show an Arizona Real ID. So a few things you need to know. The Arizona Real ID will have a star in the top right corner. That's the most obvious tell if you're not sure if you have one. If you do not have a Real ID yet, you can get through security with a second form of identification, like a passport. We talked to a TSA spokesperson about what you can expect if you don't have either on you.
For travelers who don't have a compliant Real ID document, we recommend that you get here extra early because TSA makes no guarantees. No guarantee that we will be able to verify your identity or do so in enough time for you to get through security and make your flight.
TSA officials tell us 81% of the U.S. population does have their Real ID, but that leaves 19% without one, and that's still millions of people. So even if you do have a Real ID, it's recommended that you still give yourself extra time at the airport just in case the folks who don't have one cause any delays. Live at the airport, Megan Spector, News 4, Tucson.
والله تعبنا خالص ما فيش طبيخ هدفنا كل يوم زي كذا وتو انحرقنا والله العظيم انحرقنا واحنا واقفين على التكية وهي جايبه اجيب للعيال ايش بدنا نسوي الحمد لله يعني فيش اكل فيش طحين فيش اي شيء والله العظيم تعبنا والله يا اخوي.
في الوقت الحالي الامن الغذائي منعدم تماما. الاشياء المطلوبه للاطفال تتوفر اللي هي طبعا الغذاء انه يكون شبه متوازن للاطفال انه اشياء موجوده ضروريه لبناء جسمهم هذا كله مش موجود. حتى لو في السوق موجوده الاشياء بتكون سعرها كتير غالي يعني احنا ما بنقدر انه نشتريها. طحين طبعا هذا الشيء الاساسي والمهم مش موجود تماما يعني شبه منعدم من عند معظم الناس معظم الخيام معظم النازحين.
خايفين من موت جوع اللي كنا بنسمع عنه بس خايفين من موت جوع مش خايفين من موت من الصواريخ خايفين من الجوع بس انه نجوع فعلا نموت اولادنا يموتوا قدامنا جوع بدوخوا بقعوا قدامنا وانت عاجز. وش كمان دكتور ايش نفسك؟
A bill that would broaden the definition of anti-Semitism is stalled in Congress as members debate its free speech implications. Republicans are trying to push the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act through Congress for the second year in a row, but they have even less momentum this time around because the college protests that fueled support are over. Supporters of the bill say it's necessary to protect the civil rights of Jewish students after protests on college campuses in 2024 went beyond free speech. Senator Bill Cassidy said the abuse dealt to Jewish students shouldn't be protected under the First Amendment.
Chasing Jewish students into a room, pounding on the door, and threatening them with violence is wrong. That is not free speech. Preventing a student from going to class, any student, because of their religion or ethnicity is wrong. That is not free speech. That is harassment and intimidation and should not be tolerated.
Opponents of the bill say it's too broad and that it would criminalize speech that criticizes Israel's government or its policies, even if the criticisms aren't religious in nature.
One can criticize the government of Israel, government of any country on earth for their policies, and that does not make one anti-Semitic or hateful of the people in any of those countries. It goes without saying that people in the United States of America have the right to criticize any government on earth for their policies.
The bill codifies the definition of anti-Semitism as adopted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance in 2016. It states, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Opponents, like Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, say that definition would criminalize speech that has historically been protected.
In fact, if you look at Brandenburg versus Ohio, the operative case on First Amendment, every one of these things. The First Amendment isn't about protecting good speech. It protects even the most despicable and vile speech. Brandenburg was a Nazi and an anti-Semite, and he said horrible things. And the First Amendment, the Constitution, the Supreme Court ruled that you can say terrible things. That's unique about our country.
The bill also adopts the examples of anti-Semitism as provided by the IHRA as the official legal guidance for prosecution under the Civil Rights Act. Those examples include drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, for example, claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, and holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the state of Israel.
It is not anti-Semitic to speak out against the extremist Israeli government for not allowing a single shipment of aid into Gaza in over 2 months.
In May 2024, the bill passed the House with strong bipartisan support in the wake of pro-Palestinian protests at college campuses around the country.
I believe deeply in speech and free speech, but I also believe that it's really important that all students feel safe and that students aren't threatened and with violence. And that's been the problem in a lot of these campuses right now, is that students that I've met with don't feel safe.
It was not approved by the Senate, which at the time was controlled by Democrats and then Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. This time around, it stalled in the Senate again, although the chamber is now controlled by Republicans. In the House, multiple Democrats who supported it last year say they won't vote for it again.
No, well, I still believe that, but you know, it takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, you know, as a real estate developer, you know, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. But, you know, it's, I do feel it's much better for Canada, but we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, you know, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the President just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the President has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
And they have, I must say, Canada is stepping up the military participation because Mark knew, you know, they were low and now they're stepping it up, and that's a very important thing. But never say never. Never say never.
This morning, Gaza's exhausted population bracing for a new assault, as Israel calls up thousands of additional troops for what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says will be a powerful renewed operation against Hamas. While last night, IDF jets pounding targets in Yemen, after a missile fired by Iranian-backed Houthi militants pierced Israel's air defenses and fell close to its main airport. Ever since the October 7th terror attacks, Netanyahu has vowed to defeat Hamas and free the hostages. But a year and a half into the war, Hamas is weakened but not destroyed, and still holds 59 hostages, less than half of whom are thought to be alive. Israel says this operation will be different. It will hold territory long-term and push the majority of Gazans into so-called Hamas-free zones. While overnight in the U.S., protesters occupied a building at the University of Washington in Seattle. The Trump administration had been pushing for a deal, but talks stalled. And in Gaza, hunger and desperation rising as Israel has blocked all humanitarian aid for more than 2 months. Rights groups say that's against international law, but Israel says Hamas steals incoming aid.
We're going to help the people of Gaza because they're being treated very badly by Hamas.
Among them, 14-year-old Anas, whose days are spent searching for food and water. Today, he's lucky. Tomorrow, the search for survival begins again.
Mexico has declined an offer from President Trump to deploy American troops into Mexican territory. While speaking to supporters over the weekend, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum shared details of what the Wall Street Journal has described as a tense phone call between her and Trump. Sheinbaum says Trump offered to send American military personnel to Mexico as part of an effort to combat drug trafficking in the country. However, Sheinbaum asserts she rejected the proposal, claiming to have told Trump, quote, "Sovereignty is not for sale. Sovereignty is loved and defended." The White House National Security Council responded in a statement released later Saturday. Spokesman James Hewitt said Trump has worked closely with Mexico's president to, quote, "achieve the most secure southwest border in history," but went on to claim dangerous foreign terrorist organizations continue to threaten this shared security, and Trump has, quote, "been crystal clear that Mexico must do more to combat these gangs and cartels, and the United States stands ready to assist." Meanwhile, Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One on Sunday it was true he had offered to send U.S. troops to Mexico and criticized Sheinbaum for rejecting the proposal, accusing her of being, quote, "afraid of the cartels."
The president of Mexico is a lovely woman, but she is so afraid of the cartels that she can't even think straight.
In recent months, the U.S. military has increased its presence along the southern border following an executive order issued by Trump in January. This including the deployment of additional troops and equipment, surveillance operations targeting fentanyl trafficking, and expanded cooperation between U.S. Special Forces and Mexican security forces. On February 19th, Trump also designated several drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, a move which imposed restrictions on those groups and granted U.S. law enforcement broader authority to police their activities. While there has been cooperation between the two countries in taking action against illegal drug trade, Mexico's government appears adamantly opposed to allowing a U.S. military presence within its borders, with Sheinbaum saying, quote, "we can work together, but you in your territory and us in ours."
The executive director at the Port of Los Angeles has warned that shipping volume from China will plummet this week. He joins me now to discuss. Gene Soroka and Justin Wolfers is here, a professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan. Gene, tell us what you've seen so far, because I know you've already said that a number of major American retailers, the big guys, have stopped shipments from China altogether.
Good evening, Steph. What we're seeing is that about 20% of the normally scheduled vessel arrivals for the month of May have been canceled. This week in particular, the cargo is extremely light, about 35% lower than the same time last year.
So for your average person who's saying cargo ships, how does that affect me? What is that going to mean when they go to their small store in their hometown or a big box store next week or the week after?
Well, from the last segment, you hit it on the nail on the head, Steph. We've got about 125,000 importing companies that call the Port of Los Angeles home every year. No one has more than a 5% share. So it's the small to medium-sized folks that didn't have the opportunity to stock up on inventory before this day of tariffs hit. Now they're in the middle of the crosshairs saying, either I buy at these exorbitant prices, 2.5 times more what they were just last month, and I can't pass on that cost to keep up with the big guys. So we'll likely see about 4 to 6 more weeks of normal inventory levels, then some spot shortages. You may not be able to find exactly what you want, where you want it.
Justin, weigh in here, because we're 4 to 6 weeks away from seeing real impact. These small businesses, they can't call the White House. They have no lobbying ability, and they certainly didn't have the money to load up on inventory the way a big box store could. And we know from the big box stores, they're already predicting pain.
Yeah, let me take Gene's story and add a little bit more economics to it, which is we know that there's less stuff coming in. That's what Gene just told us. We're not making more stuff, so therefore there's going to be less supply. Look, there's 3 ways this can resolve. I think a lot of people have been very quick to jump to the everything's going to be sold out, there'll be nothing left on the shelves story. That's one possibility, but it's not the only one. Another possibility, of course, is the reason that they're not ordering this stuff is they realise they're going to have to jack up their prices, and they'll jack them up so high that not many people are going to want to buy stuff. So it could be we've got a big adverse price shock coming and you're going to get some sticker shock coming right at you. The third possibility, of course, is that the president may well plunge the economy into recession. If we're at a point where we've got too much demand and not enough supply, well, the recession will wipe out all the demand and maybe there will be enough stuff on the shelves, but it'll be there because mums and dads can't afford to buy it.
Gene, from your perspective, is there anything that could turn this around in the short term?
Absent getting together with trading nations and crafting these framework deals that the administration is talking about, no, I don't see any change. On the export side, the American farmer is getting hammered. Here in California's Central Valley, whether it's almonds, walnut handlers, they're not selling. And just in the month of March, Steph, Brazil sold more soybeans to China than ever in their history. Lower trade barriers and favorable exchange rates.
So what is it like for freight business? What is it like for people in the cargo business, people who are at the Port of Los Angeles day in and day out over the last 3 weeks? Tell me what their experience is like.
If you're a trucker that's been hauling 4 or 5 containers per day, starting this week, you'll likely be hauling 2 or 3 loads. The dock workers who've been getting overtime and running back-to-back shifts will likely work less than a traditional work week. Warehouses, same way, not as much staff is going to be needed. Again, in the interim, as we see out now several weeks, and volume dropping precipitously and fast.
Iran says it remains committed to nuclear talks with the United States. An unnamed official was quoted by Iranian media as saying the 4th round of negotiations could take place over the weekend in the capital of Oman. While the timing has not yet been finalized, the source said discussions will take place over 2 days. US President Donald Trump has threatened to bomb Iran if no agreement is reached. Iran is willing to build mutual trust through negotiations, and this is subject to the position and statement of the United States at the negotiating table. The threat posed by the United States against Iran will undoubtedly prompt the Iranian armed forces to spare no effort and stay on high alert against any aggression or adventurism. There is no doubt about it. Trump withdrew the US from the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and world powers. Western countries say its nuclear program is geared towards producing weapons, whereas Tehran insists it's purely for civilian purposes.
What do all these preparations tell you? That India is getting ready for every scenario, including the possibility of an armed conflict with Pakistan. What about Pakistan? Can they even afford a war? The short answer is no, and we already know that. But for those who had doubts, there's a new assessment that's out. It is from the ratings agency Moody's. It is sounding an alarm. Moody's released a report /warning for Pakistan. The Defense Minister Khwaja Asif must take note because he's been threatening strikes. The Moody's report says the first casualty of a conflict with India will be Pakistan's economy. Growth will slow down further, debt pressure will rise, and foreign funding that's already dwindling could dry up. Of course, Pakistan cannot fund itself. It survives on bailouts. So it needs foreign funding very badly. Later this week, the IMF will meet. That's the International Monetary Fund, the lender of the last resort. They will meet to review their latest loan to Pakistan. You see, 8 months ago, they gave the last package worth $7 billion. This is Pakistan's bailout number 24. Yes, they've taken 24 bailouts in less than 7 decades. The first one was in 1958. That's when the first bailout came, 1958. And since then, 24 IMF bailouts for Pakistan. That is a world record. No other country has borrowed more money from the IMF than Pakistan. And that is just one foreign source, the International Monetary Fund, one of the many sources that Pakistan has. They rely on multiple countries and multiple agencies for handouts. In 2019, 47% of Pakistan's debt came from global institutions. By the end of 2024, that number jumped to 56%. And look at the kind of money that Pakistan owes. Nearly $16 billion to the Asian Development Bank, more than $20 billion to the World Bank, and at least $8 billion to the IMF. That's the $7 billion bailout package. This is being dispersed in stages. And on top of that, the IMF gave another loan to Pakistan in the month of March, a climate resilience loan of $1.3 billion. Well, that's a lot of money and debt. But that's not all. Pakistan also owes money to bilateral lenders. The biggest one is China. Pakistan owes China over $28 billion. Saudi Arabia comes second. Pakistan owes them around $9 billion. And their debt has been on the rise. Last year, Pakistan's total external debt shot up by 18%. In 2023, the debt was around $73 billion. Last year, it crossed $86 billion. So Pakistan is surviving on loans and bailouts. The obvious question is this: where is this money going? Are these bailouts funding Pakistan's terror activities? India has been pushing this point to show the world how their loans are funding Pakistani terrorism. And now India plans to raise this issue with global agencies, the likes of the World Bank and the IMF. India will ask both these lenders to look into this, to examine how Pakistan is using its bailout funds. And it's a legitimate question. In fact, those lending money to Pakistan must raise it themselves. The April 22 attack, the one in Pahalgam, killed 26 tourists. The Pahalgam attack killed 26 tourists. The Resistance Front took responsibility for it. This is a group linked to the Lashkar-e-Toiba, which is a UN-designated terror outfit based in and backed by Pakistan. Despite international sanctions, the Lashkar-e-Toiba is thriving in Pakistan. Their leaders remain active. They are clearly well-funded. They have enough cash to run terror camps and to carry out cross-border attacks. So we come back to the question, where are they getting the money from? Who is funding these Pakistani terror groups and how? India should build a strong case and take it to the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. This is the global terror financing watchdog. The next FATF meeting is in June. India should use that opportunity to highlight how UN-sanctioned groups are still active in Pakistan and how Islamabad has failed to curb their financing. India must push for action and get Pakistan back into the FATF grey list, which is very important to restrict the flow of foreign money into Pakistan. This should happen irrespective of India's military response. It's important to build sustained pressure on Pakistan's finances because this terror state cannot afford a conflict. Not when its economy runs on borrowed money. Not when it is surviving on bailouts. Pakistan's lenders must take responsibility for its actions. If not, they will be complicit in bankrolling a war against India.